The big meeting room of the Galaxy Assembly felt strange today, even though it was full of people from 300 different worlds. Kyung-ho from the green planet Viridia looked around nervously as he sat in his special breathing suit. The room was huge with walls made of clear crystal that sparkled like diamonds, but today it felt cold and scary. On the giant floating screens above them, pictures showed space battles happening far away. 3 months had passed since anyone heard from the EU. Humans, and their silence was louder than any scream. The humans had protected everyone for almost 200 years, standing between the peaceful worlds and all the bad things that lived in the dark, empty spaces between stars. Haijin from the water, World Naraya whispered through her talking machine that helped other people understand her fish-like language. "They are really gone," she said, and her voice sounded like crying. The machine made crackling sounds because even it seemed sad. The humans had always been there when scary things came from space pirates who stole from trading ships, fighters who attacked weak planets, old war machines left behind by dead people from long ago, and worse things that nobody could even explain properly. Captain, so young, who worked for the Assembly Defense Force, touched some buttons and made new pictures appear on the screens. She had been checking on all the human places for weeks now. Every human city, every army base, every research station had gone quiet. At the same time, no calls for help, no signs of fighting, no people left alive anywhere. It was like all the humans had just decided to disappear, leaving behind only empty buildings and spaceships floating alone in space with nobody inside them. The other aliens had gotten used to humans protecting them. Their own armies had become small and weak, only good for keeping peace during small arguments between neighbors. Now, with their protectors gone, the dangerous things in space were starting to notice. Long-distance sensors that could see very far away detected movement in the forbidden areas, places where humans had told everyone never to go, because terrible things lived there. Kyung-ho remembered when he was young, and pirates had attacked his homeworld. His family had hidden in their basement for 3 days waiting for help. Then human ships arrived like angels from heaven. Their weapons were so powerful, and their pilots so brave, that the pirates ran away in fear, crying like babies. The humans never asked for anything in return. They just smiled and said it was their job to keep everyone safe. Now those same pirates were probably getting ready to attack again, along with much worse enemies. Kyung-ho could see fear in the eyes of every person in the meeting room. Aliens with tentacles instead of arms were shaking. Creatures that looked like giant bugs were making nervous clicking sounds with their mouths. Fish people were swimming in circles in their water tanks. Things with fur and big teeth were growling softly. Min-Soo, who came from a desert planet covered in red sand, stood up to speak. His people had fought alongside humans many times, and he knew more about war than most others in the room. He said the humans had not just protected them from small threats. They had been fighting against enemies so terrible that most people did not even know they existed. Ancient creatures that had been alive since before most planets were born. Things that ate entire worlds for breakfast, machines that had gone crazy and wanted to destroy all living things. The room became even more quiet when Min-Soo said this. Everyone knew he was telling the truth, but nobody wanted to believe it. They had lived such peaceful lives under human protection that they had forgotten what real danger felt like. Their children played in parks without fear. Their ships traveled between stars without weapons. Many worlds had no armies at all because humans had promised to protect them. So young showed more pictures on the screens. These were from the edge of known space where humans had built huge forts and warning stations. The forts were empty now, but the sensors still worked. They showed dark ships moving closer to inhabited world, ships that had been hiding in the cold, empty space between galaxies for many years, waiting for their chance to attack. Tae-ho from the ice world, Kristalla, had been studying human military records for weeks, trying to understand how they fought. So well, he discovered that humans thought about war differently than other species. Most aliens tried to avoid fighting or end battles quickly with as little damage as possible. But humans understood that sometimes you had to be more violent than your enemy to make them stop forever. They did not fight just to win one battle. They fought to end all future battles. The human way of thinking scared many peaceful aliens, but now they were starting to understand why it had worked so well. Humans had enemies that could not be reasoned with or scared away. They had to be completely defeated, or they would keep coming back stronger each time. The humans had learned this lesson through thousands of years of fighting on their own world before they ever reached for the stars. Jae-min, who worked as a translator for many different alien languages, had been reading human history books. He told everyone that humans had always been fighters. Even when they lived on just one planet, they had wars that lasted for years. They learned how to make better weapons, how to plan better attacks, and how to never give up even when things looked hopeless. This made them perfect for protecting peaceful aliens who had never needed to learn such terrible skills. But now the students had to become teachers. The protected had to become protectors. And nobody knew if they were smart enough, strong enough, or brave enough to fill the empty space that humans had left behind. The assembly had ships, but they were built for exploring and making friends, not for fighting wars. Their weapons were designed to stop enemies, not destroy them. Their crews knew how to talk to aliens and study new planets, but they had never faced an enemy that wanted to kill everyone. As the meeting continued and more bad news came from the outer worlds, everyone began to understand that their safe, happy lives were over. The age of peace was ending, and the age of fear had begun. Without humans to stand guard, the galaxy was about to remember what it felt like to be prey instead of predator. The darkness between the stars was full of hungry things, and they were all coming home. Minho was working the night shift at the mining station on Kepler 442b when the alarm system started screaming. The young technician had been monitoring the outer defense sensors for 3 boring years, and nothing interesting had ever happened. The most exciting thing was usually a small asteroid drifting too close to the mining platforms. But tonight was different. Tonight, the sensors were detecting something that made his hands shake with fear. The computer screens lit up with red warnings as unknown ships appeared out of hyperspace like ghosts materializing from nowhere. Minho counted 12 vessels moving in perfect formation toward the mining world. Their ships were long and dark with hulls that looked like they had been through 1,000 battles. Scars and burn marks covered their surfaces, telling stories of violence that Minho did not want to imagine. These were not the desperate pirates that sometimes attacked cargo ships looking for easy money. These ships moved with the grace of predators that had been hunting for centuries. Minho recognized them from the old war records that humans had kept locked away in secret files. These were devourers, an ancient race that humans had defeated and driven into the dark, empty spaces beyond known civilization decades ago. The planetary defense grid activated automatically, just like the human engineers had designed it to do. Laser batteries powered up and missile launchers swiveled toward the approaching enemy. But without human tactical genius to guide the weapons, they were slow and predictable. The defense computers followed simple programs that worked against pirates, but these enemies were much smarter. The devourer ships danced between the defensive fire, like sharks swimming through water. Their own weapons were terrifying to watch. Beams of purple energy that cut through metal like it was soft butter. Missiles that exploded with such force that entire mining platforms vanished in balls of fire. The defensive systems tried their best, but they had been built to stop small raiders. Not a full military assault. Minho tried to contact Governor Taemin in the capital city, but the communication lines were being jammed. The devourers were not just attacking. They were making sure no one could call for help. He watched helplessly as the outer mining platforms exploded one by one. Their precious metals and rare crystals scattered into space like glittering tears. On the main viewer, he could see the civilian transport ships trying to evacuate people from the mining stations. These ships had never been designed for war. They were slow and clumsy with no weapons and weak shields. The devourers herded them like wolves driving sheep toward a cliff. Any ship that tried to escape was destroyed immediately with surgical precision that showed how much experience these killers had. Governor Taemin was in his office trying to coordinate the evacuation when the government building shook. From nearby explosions, his assistant Jung-ho ran into the room with tears streaming down his face. "Sir, the orbital defense stations are gone. The devourers destroyed them all in less than 10 minutes. We have nothing left to fight with." Taemin had been governor for 15 years during the peaceful time under human protection. He had dealt with trade disputes and weather problems and requests for new schools. But he had never prepared for war. Nobody had, because the humans had made war unnecessary. His hands trembled as he tried to think of what to do. The evacuation ships were packed with families carrying whatever they could grab. Su-jin held her baby daughter close to her chest as they ran toward the landing pad. Her husband Kyung-min was somewhere else in the city trying to help other people escape. She prayed to whatever gods might be listening that they would see each other again, but the Devourers were not interested in letting anyone escape. They had waited decades for this moment, when the humans were gone and they could take revenge on everyone who had lived safely under human protection. The transport ships were easy targets. Their shields collapsed under the first hits, and their hulls broke apart like eggs. Young Jae-ho was piloting one of the evacuation ships when the Devourers attacked it. His passengers screamed as purple energy beams tore through the cargo hold. He tried to dodge and weave like he had seen human pilots do in old war movies, but his ship was too slow and the enemies too fast. The last thing he saw was a massive Devourer warship filling his view screen before everything went white, in the hidden emergency shelter beneath the government building. A few dozen people huddled together listening to the sounds of destruction above them. Hae-young whispered prayers while her son Jin-woo tried to be brave for his little sister. The building shook again and dust fell from the ceiling. They all knew they were probably going to die, but they held onto each other anyway. The attack lasted 6 hours. When it was over, 2 million people who had been alive that morning were dead. The beautiful mining world with its floating cities and crystal gardens had become a graveyard. The Devourers had not taken anything, they had simply destroyed everything as a message to the rest of the galaxy. A few hidden shuttles managed to escape during the chaos, carrying maybe 100 survivors who had been lucky enough to reach the emergency launch bays. So Young was one of them, a maintenance worker who knew about the secret tunnels under the spaceport. She helped 12 other people reach a small cargo ship, and they blasted off into space while the Devourers were busy destroying the main city A's. They flew away from their dead world. So Young looked back at the burning planet through the rear window. She could see Devourer ships still firing at the wreckage, making sure nothing would ever grow there again. The beautiful blue and green world, where she had been born, was now just a ball of fire and smoke. The survivors brought a recording with them that made everyone in the galaxy freeze with terror. It was a message the Devourers had broadcast on all frequencies while they were destroying the mining world. The voice was cold and full of hate like winter wind through a graveyard. The human pets are gone, the message said. Now you remember your place. When that recording reached the Galaxy Assembly 3 days later, panic spread through. Every civilized world, ancient enemies were stirring in the darkness, sensing that their greatest enemy had vanished. The galaxy was about to remember what it felt like to be hunted, and there was nowhere to hide. The emergency meeting room in the Galaxy Assembly was chaos. Jin-woo, the assembly leader, banged his metal stick on the speaking table trying to get everyone to be quiet, but nobody was listening. Representatives from hundreds of worlds were all talking at once, their voices mixing together like a storm of fear and anger. Some were demanding protection. Others wanted evacuation ships to take their people to safer places. Many were just crying. The holographic displays around the room showed more bad news every few minutes. Another world had gone dark. Another distress signal had been cut short. The attack on the mining world had been just the beginning. Now enemies were coming out of hiding everywhere like insects crawling from under rocks when you lifted them up. Ambassador Dong-ho from the forest world of Greenleaf stood up and shouted over the noise. We trusted the humans to protect us. Now they are gone and we are defenseless. My people do not even have weapons. We grow food and make art. We do not know how to fight. His voice cracked with desperation, and many others nodded their heads in agreement. From the back of the room, Commander Yoon Seo pushed her way forward. She was one of the few military officers who had trained with humans, and she looked different from the other aliens in the room. Her uniform was practical and worn. Her eyes were hard, and she carried herself like someone who had seen real fighting. The peaceful representatives moved away from her as she walked to the front. Yoon Seo activated the main display screen and showed pictures of human military equipment, weapons that could destroy entire fleets, armor that could protect against the worst attacks, strategies that had won battles against impossible odds. She had studied all of this during her time with human instructors, learning things that made other species uncomfortable. "Listen to me," she said in a voice that cut through the noise like a sharp knife. "The humans did not think like us about war. We try to make peace, we try to end fights quickly with as little damage as possible. But humans understood that sometimes you have to be more violent than your enemy to make them stop forever. They did not fight just to win battles. They fought to end wars permanently." Many of the peaceful aliens looked sick when she said this. Violence was something they had tried to forget existed under human protection. Their worlds had become soft and comfortable places where children played, without fear, and nobody locked their doors at night. The idea of becoming violent themselves was terrifying, but Yunseo continued talking, showing them pictures of the enemies now attacking their worlds, the Shadow Syndicate from the southern part of the galaxy, their stealth ships that could become invisible and strike without warning, the Iron Horde from the northern spiral, their massive warships covered in thick armor and bristling with weapons. These enemies did not want to make peace. They wanted to conquer and destroy. Young Jinsu from the crystal caves of Minerva raised his hand. "Commander, what do we do? We have cargo ships and passenger transports. Our biggest weapons are mining lasers that can barely scratch paint off enemy armor. How can we fight against enemies that the humans spent decades pushing back into the darkness?" Yunseo touched more buttons, and the display changed to show factory planets and shipyards. "We have to change everything," she said. "Every factory that makes consumer goods must be converted to make weapons. Every civilian ship must be fitted with armor and guns. Every young person who has never seen violence must learn to fight, because if we do not, our entire civilization will be destroyed." Assembly voted to authorize emergency military production. Jin Woo signed the orders with shaking hands, knowing that he was ending the age of peace that had lasted for generations. Factories that had been making household items and entertainment devices started making bullets and missiles instead. Shipyards that built pleasure craft began constructing warships. But changing from a peaceful society to a military one was not easy or fast. Kyung-soo was a factory manager on the industrial world, a Forgeheim, and he discovered that making weapons was much harder than making cooking pots. The metal had to be stronger, the designs more complex, the quality control more strict. His workers, who had been making simple things for civilian use, struggled to understand the complicated blueprints for military equipment. On the training worlds, new recruits were learning to fight in crash courses that compressed years of military education into just a few weeks. Hai Jin had been a teacher before the crisis, and now she was learning to use a plasma rifle. Her hands shook every time she pulled the trigger, because her whole life had been about helping children learn and grow, not about destroying things. The hardest part was changing the way people thought peaceful aliens had to learn to be suspicious and aggressive. Minsu, who had run a trading post on the frontier, found himself studying enemy tactics and planning ambushes. It felt wrong to his peaceful nature, but the alternative was death for everyone he cared about. While the Assembly tried to build an army, more worlds fell to the ancient enemies. The Shadow Syndicate attacked communication stations, cutting off entire sectors from outside contact. Their invisible ships struck supply convoys, leaving colonies without food or medicine. The Iron Horde used their massive dreadnoughts to smash through the hastily assembled defense fleets that tried to stop them. Each victory made the enemies bolder and attracted more predators from the dark spaces between stars. Pirates, who had been too scared to attack when humans were around, now formed huge fleets to raid peaceful worlds. Slave traders emerged from hidden bases to capture people and sell them to the highest bidder. War profiteers began selling weapons to both sides, caring only about profit. While the galaxy burned, Tae-young was monitoring the galactic communication networks when she noticed something terrifying. The attacks were not random. They were coordinated. Someone or something was organizing all these different enemy groups and pointing them toward the most vulnerable targets. It was like watching a pack of wolves being directed by an invisible hunter. The worst news came from the Outer Rim, where human military bases had been located. Scout ships sent to investigate found the bases empty but intact, as if the humans had simply walked away from their posts, leaving everything behind. Food was still fresh in the cafeterias. Personal items were still in the sleeping quarters. But there were no bodies. No signs of fighting, no clues about where the humans had gone. As reports continued to pour in from across the galaxy, the Assembly began to understand the true scope of what they faced. The humans had not just been protecting them from a few pirate groups or border disputes. They had been holding back a tide of darkness that stretched across the entire galaxy. Now that tide was flowing freely, and the peaceful worlds were drowning in it, one by one. Dr. Sujin floated through the empty corridors of Luna Station, feeling like she was walking through a tomb. The human research facility orbiting Earth's moon had been abandoned for months, but everything still worked perfectly. The lights turned on automatically when she entered each room. The air was clean and fresh. The computers hummed quietly, waiting for orders that would never come. She was leading a small team of assembly researchers who had been sent to search for any clues about what happened to humanity. Behind her floated Kyung-woo, a computer expert who specialized in breaking into encrypted files, and Min-jung, a xenobiologist who understood alien species better than most people. The station was huge, with hundreds of levels and thousands of rooms filled with human research. The outer sections contained normal science equipment, telescopes for studying distant stars, laboratories for analyzing alien plants and minerals, libraries full of books about peaceful exploration. But as they went deeper into the station, the security got stronger. Door after door required higher clearance levels that the humans had never shared with other species. It took Kyung-woo 3 days to break through the final security barrier. When the massive vault door finally opened with a soft hiss, they found themselves in a room that changed everything. The walls were covered with displays showing star maps marked with red warning symbols, classified files with names like Project Nightfall and Operation Dark Guardian filled the computer systems. Sujin read the first file with growing horror and had to sit down in a chair to keep from falling. The humans had not just been protecting the galaxy from pirates and raiders. They had been fighting against threats that could end all life everywhere. Ancient machine intelligences that consumed entire solar systems for fuel. Parasitic entities that could take over the minds of entire species through quantum connections. Dimensional rifts that led to realities where the laws of physics had gone completely insane. The file showed that humanity had discovered these cosmic horrors during their early exploration of deep space. Instead of running away or hiding like most species would have done, the humans had decided to fight. They created secret organizations with names like the Void Watchers and the Reality Guard, whose job was to hunt down and contain things that defied all understanding. Min-jung found video records of human soldiers fighting against enemies that hurt to look at, creatures made of living darkness that could reach through solid walls, machines that rebuilt themselves from the atoms of destroyed planets, entities that existed in multiple dimensions at once and could attack from directions that did not exist in normal space. The human warriors wore special armor and carried weapons that used technologies no other species had ever seen. The most terrifying discovery was in a section marked Omega Protocol. Deep beneath the station, they found a massive control room filled with monitoring equipment that tracked containment facilities scattered across the entire galaxy. Red lights blinked on a 3-dimensional map showing the locations of prisons built to hold cosmic nightmares. Each facility was powered by human technology and maintained by human oversight. Engineer Dong-woo studied the containment systems with growing dread. The barriers holding these monsters were incredibly complex, using exotic physics and materials that took human scientists centuries to develop. But they all depended on regular maintenance and constant monitoring. Without humans to keep them running, the systems were slowly beginning to fail. Facility Omega-7 in the Perseus arm showed yellow warning lights indicating that its containment field was weakening. Facility Omega-12 near the Galactic core was displaying critical error messages. The prisoners inside these cosmic jails were testing their bonds and finding them weaker than they had been for decades. Hae Young was translating human military records when she found something that made her blood freeze. The files described an enemy called the Hunger that had destroyed 17 galaxies before humans managed to trap it in a specially built prison. The prison required constant attention from human technicians who understood how to balance the exotic energy fields that kept the creature contained. Another file talked about the Whisper Network, a collection of parasitic minds that could infect entire species through their communication systems. Once infected, a species would slowly lose its free will and become part of a collective consciousness that served the network's alien agenda. Humans had spent 50 years hunting down and isolating every node of the network, trapping the infected minds in quantum isolation chambers. So Young discovered records of the void swarm mechanical entities that reproduced by converting matter into more copies of themselves. A single swarm unit the size of a grain of sand could theoretically consume an entire planet if left unchecked. Humans had fought a secret war against these machines for over a century, finally defeating them by trapping the master control unit in a facility hidden inside a black hole. As the research team studied more files, they began to understand the true scope of humanity's sacrifice. Every major human military base had been built near a containment facility. Human exploration ships had not been looking for new worlds to colonize. They had been hunting for cosmic threats to neutralize. Human scientists had not been studying alien life for knowledge. They had been learning how to fight against things that should not exist. The most shocking discovery came from the final classified archive. Jin Ho found evidence that some of these cosmic horrors had been actively trying to break free for decades. The hunger had been growing stronger despite its prison. The Whisper network had found ways to send weak signals through the quantum barriers. The Void Swarm had begun constructing escape mechanisms using materials that existed in 11 dimensions. According to the human records, these entities had been working together despite being imprisoned in different parts of the galaxy. They had developed a plan to escape, simultaneously creating a coordinated attack that would overwhelm humanity's ability to respond. The plan was scheduled to begin 3 months ago, exactly when humanity had vanished from the galaxy. Tai Min read the final report with hands that shook so badly he could barely hold the datapad. The humans had discovered that their enemies were about to break free, and there was no way to stop them. The containment systems were failing. The cosmic horrors were too powerful, and there were not enough human soldiers left to fight them all. The last entry in the human military logs was a single sentence that explained everything. "We cannot contain them, we will take them with us." The research team sat in stunned silence as they realized what had happened. Humanity had not been defeated or driven away. They had made the ultimate sacrifice, somehow dragging their cosmic enemies into whatever void lay beyond death itself. The galaxy would never know the details of humanity's final battle, but their heroic legacy lived on in every world that still harbored life. But now the secondary containment systems were failing, and lesser horrors were beginning to stir. The conventional enemies attacking the galaxy were nothing compared to what was still trapped in the weakening prisons. Soon even worse nightmares would break free, and the children of the galaxy would have to face them without their human guardians. The truth spread through the galaxy assembly like wildfire, burning away the last pieces of innocence that remained. Chang Ho, who had become the leader of all assembly military forces, sat in his command center, staring at reports that made his mind struggle to understand what he was reading. The galaxy had been living inside a bubble of safety, protected not just from pirates and raiders, but from cosmic nightmares that could tear apart reality itself. Now that bubble was breaking, and the creatures inside were finally learning what their peaceful existence had really cost. Representatives from hundreds of worlds called for emergency meetings. Some demanded that the assembly try to fix the human containment systems. Others wanted to evacuate entire sectors before the cosmic horrors broke free. Many just sat in stunned silence, trying to process the magnitude of what humanity had been doing in secret. Chang Ho made the hardest decision any military commander had ever faced. They could not replace humanity as cosmic wardens because they lacked the knowledge, the technology, and probably the courage to do what humans had done. But they could try to buy time for their people. Elite teams would be sent to the most critical containment facilities, knowing that most of them would never come home. Captain Jae Young volunteered to lead the first mission to Facility Omega-7 in the Perseus Arm. She had trained with human special forces years ago and understood their equipment better than most other aliens. Her team included 12 volunteers from different worlds, all of them knowing they were probably going to die but wanting to try anyway. The journey to Omega-7 took 6 days through hyperspace. During the trip, Jae Young studied the human technical manuals trying to understand how the containment systems worked. The documents were written in complex scientific language that made her head hurt, but she forced herself to keep reading. The lives of everyone in the galaxy might depend on her understanding these alien technologies. When they arrived at the facility, Jae-young felt her heart sink. The containment station was massive, bigger than most cities, but it was clearly in trouble. Warning lights flashed, red across its hull, and energy readings showed that the prison barriers were failing faster than the human computers had predicted. Whatever was trapped inside was pushing against its bonds with increasing strength. Dong-soo, the team's engineer, managed to access the human control systems using codes that Dr. Soo-jin had found in the Luna Station archives. The main computer showed that something called the Hunger was testing the weakening barriers every few minutes, learning from each attempt and finding new ways to escape. The containment field was at 30% strength and dropping. Jae-young led her team into the station's depths, following maintenance tunnels that human technicians had used for decades. The walls hummed with exotic energy and the air tasted like metal and electricity. They found the central containment chamber, a massive room dominated by a sphere of crackling energy fields. Inside the sphere, something moved that hurt to look at directly. The Hunger was not a creature in any normal sense. It was more like a living hole in space, a patch of absolute darkness that seemed to eat light itself. When it moved, reality bent around it, making the air shimmer and twist. The human barriers were the only thing keeping it from reaching out and consuming everything within 1,000 light years. Min Ho, the team's physicist, tried to stabilize the containment field using the human control panels, but the technology was too advanced for him to fully understand. He managed to boost the barriers to 50% strength, but the improvement lasted only a few hours before the Hunger found a way to weaken them again. Through the communication system, they heard reports from other facilities across the galaxy. Most of the teams sent to reinforce the containment systems had failed. The cosmic horrors were too powerful, the human technology too complex, and time was running out. Facility Omega-12 had to be evacuated when its prisoner began breaking through the barriers. Team after team reported that they could not stop the escapes. Chang-ho received the worst news 3 days into the mission facility. Omega-7 was beyond saving. The Hunger had grown too strong during its decades of imprisonment, feeding on the energy fields that were supposed to contain it. The only option left was to destroy the entire facility and hope that the explosion would take the cosmic horror with it. Jae-young and her team had less than an hour to escape before Chang-ho would detonate the station's self-destruct system. As they ran through the collapsing corridors toward their evacuation ship, she could hear the Hunger testing its prison one final time. The containment sphere cracked like broken glass, and darkness began to leak out. Their ship barely escaped before the facility exploded in a blast of light that could be seen from 50 star systems away. For a moment it seemed like they had succeeded, but long-range sensors detected something terrifying. The explosion had not destroyed the Hunger. It had only scattered it into smaller pieces that were now floating through space, looking for new sources of energy to consume. Within days, 3 star systems went dark, their suns not exploding, but simply disappearing as if they had never existed. The Hunger was loose and growing stronger with every planet it devoured, converting normal matter into something that should not exist in reality. The human warnings had been correct. This enemy could not be fought with conventional weapons. More containment facilities failed as their cosmic prisoners broke free. The Whisper network began sending signals through quantum space, trying to infect the minds of entire species. The Void Swarm started converting asteroids into more copies of itself, preparing for another campaign of universal destruction. Ancient entities that humans had spent centuries hunting emerged from their hiding places, ready to finish what they had started eons ago. But something unexpected happened as the galaxy faced its darkest hour. The peaceful species that had lived under human protection began to remember lessons they thought they had forgotten. Young aliens who had never known war started thinking like soldiers. Farmers and teachers and artists picked up weapons and learned to fight, not because they wanted to, but because they had to Kyung-min, who had been a poet before the crisis, found himself leading a defense of his homeworld against Shadow Syndicate raiders. He used tactics he had read about in human military histories, organizing his people into guerrilla fighters who struck from hiding and disappeared before the enemy could respond. HFY, a scientist who had studied peaceful applications of technology, began designing weapons that could hurt cosmic horrors. She combined human research with alien innovations, creating tools that even humanity had never imagined. The galaxy was learning to defend itself, one desperate battle at a time. War for survival had only just begun, and nobody knew if the peaceful children of the galaxy had inherited enough wisdom from their human guardians to see them through the long night ahead. But for the first time since humanity vanished, there was hope flickering in the darkness. The age of innocence was over, but the age of courage had begun.